In stats, we dove a little deeper into the basic rules of probability. We started these yesterday, and we talked about Rule 1 and 2, a little bit about Rule 4, Rule 3. I think it's typed on your handout. Probability of A is outcomes in A over total outcomes. And you get the probability of A. So that's like favorable events over all events, or favorable outcomes over all outcomes. So that's your basic probability that you probably learned back in middle school. Number 4 is talking about the complement, not A. So probability of A plus its complement has to add to 1. Has to. So it's a nice backwards way to approach some questions that you encounter, like if they're wanting the probability of not A. On number 5 here, this doesn't look that confusing, but when we introduce independence next week, it gets confusing. So this is not referring to independence, or let's say independent events. Totally different concept. It's very annoying because the words sound similar, like they are synonymous, but they are not. So just because two events are mutually exclusive, that is not saying if they're independent. It's saying that the intersect of A and B is 0 because they cannot overlap, because they cannot both happen. So like if we were to look at a Venn diagram of mutually exclusive events, if you have any experience with Venn diagrams, you draw circles inside of a box to resemble events. So like this is event A and event B. And if you throw a dart at this board, call this a dart board if you want, you will never hit A and B. You'll only hit one of them, or one of them, or none of them. All right, so A and B equals 0. All right. Moving on, I think we have an example, an actual probability problem. We do. It's about college classes, students taking them from far away, probably online courses, and it says show that it's legitimate. So all they're implying, or implying that you check, is that they all add up to 1. So please double check that they all add up to 1. And since they say show, I would write something like this. And they do. When you type it in, they add up to 1. The next question, they want to know that the probability that a student is not 18 to 23. So one way to approach it is to add up all the other probabilities that that are not 18 to 23. So that's one way. Another way is to do 1 minus the probability of 18 to 23. And that way you can do it without a calculator. It's actually a lot easier. But if you do it the first way, you get the same exact answer. Doesn't matter the way you do it. Please show your process, how you did it, how you got to your answer. Don't just write 0.43. All right. Next, we looked at another type of table. This is called a two-way table. Because there are two variables. Gender and pierced ears. Looking at the table, it typically looks pretty readable, like people can figure it out usually. It's really nice when they print a table, but there's a problem that we'll look at the end of this packet where there's not a table printed, and it's hard to piece together, especially the first time you do it. So typically you want to make a two-way table, or like the last problem, that was called a one-way table because there's just one variable in question. But this one's a two-way table because there's two questions: what gender and if they have their ears pierced. So if they're only referring to one variable, you typically are just looking at the margins here and here. So that's like question A. Question B, I see an and that is a very important word. Part C, when they use or, that is a very important word. It changes things. So that is crucial in understanding probability. All right, so if it just generally says probability of pierced, you can write it like this, and you add up all the pierced ears. Looks like it's added for us to 103, and there's no like if or of. That means they're referring to the grand total, so 178, which also is 0.5787. I am A-okay with either of those answers. So you can write the fraction or the decimal. Please do not round to the tenths. Do not write 0.6. That would be bad. Please try and get in the habit of rounding to the fourth place. That makes it super accurate. And you won't lose points. So part B, this is called the intersect. And I try and avoid symbols on this first intersection question. And I try and figure out if maybe someone can figure it out without the formal notation. So all you want to find is where they cross in the table. And that is at 19. So you look at males and you look at pierced ears, and they overlap right here. That is the number we want. So probability, one way of writing this, male and pierced, is 19 out of 178, which is 1067. I'm okay with either of those. All right. Another way, now that you see it's pretty easy to find, I hope, you can notate it, and it's commonly referred to like this: male arch pierced. Same thing. Male intersect pierced. And on C, when they use the word or, they're talking about union. And this could be referring to just males, or just pierced, or both. Or is a very open-ended question, and it's not narrowing down to one of the events. So whenever, the simplest way to approach an or is to just circle any number that refers to a word typed. So, like, these are males. These are males. I already circled the 19 for pierced. These are also pierced. So, all three of those. They don't both have to happen. So one way to do this is to say 19 plus 71 plus 84 divided by 178. So you should get 174 divided by 178. That answer is perfect. Or you can write it in decimal form, 0.9775. On the next slide, you're going to see that you're allowed to write this male union pierced. And there's a formula that's typed on your formula chart that says to take all the males, all the pierced, and subtract the intersect. And if you do it that way, you get the same exact answer. Because when you add those two right here, you're adding 19 twice. So either way, pick your method. Just add up the ones we did initially, or use the formula on the bottom right. Doesn't matter to me. All right. All right, we're almost done. We skipped that for a moment. Here's your general addition rule. This is always, always true. We read this or. This part is typed on the formula chart. So you don't necessarily have to memorize it, but yet it's very easy to memorize. So you add the two events in question and subtract their intersect. This is not on the formula chart. And neither is this. Oh, I messed up there. All right, so they don't tell you what or is or what and is. You got to have that memorized, or you can write it on your formula chart for now. All right, one more Venn diagram practice, I believe. So on the back of everyone's handout, I had people draw these. So there's a total of 4 of them. Your entire handout is blank on the back. So maybe draw these first 2, and then I'll scroll to the next 2. Hit pause. Okay, here we go. So we want to shade where these things overlap or intersect. And this first one's pretty easy. It is right there. They overlap right there. The second one, though, right off the bat is confusing. So one way to approach this, if you're confused, some people just see it and they know the answer. But one way to approach it is to shade all of A. So I'm going to shade all of A. If you're using a pencil, shade lightly, very lightly. And shade all of not B. So on the second one, I don't want to shade B, but I want to shade everything else. So I start out here. But not B is also, I should have used another color. So this is not B, sorry, this purple. I'm going to back up. This is confusing. Okay. The purple is not B. But isn't not B also here? And anywhere you've shaded twice is the answer. So the answer to this problem is this, the dark region. So the dark purple is the answer. All right, let's do two more, and we'll be done. So draw those, hit pause. Here we go. So I'm going to shade all of not A. And you may already have figured out how to do these without having to shade twice. So this is not A. And then I'm going to shade all of B. And once again, the answer is where I double shaded. So this region here. Anytime you see that arch right here, it's asking for the overlap. So on the last one, shade all of not A. Shade all of not B. And the answer is where I double shaded, which is outside of the circles. I'm not going to do a great job on this shading. So you can shade every inch if you want, but the dark purple is the answer. All right, that was it. I will see y'all later. Bye.